The following episode will contain spoilers. You have been warned.
You're listening to Cinema IRL, the podcast that throws you into the movie and asks the question, what would you do? Aging is a fact of life, but when you're a Las Vegas showgirl, it's exceptionally brutal. Amber and Scott discuss The Last Showgirl. And now, Cinema IRL.
I wish I could switch places for just one day.
What would you do?
Put yourself in my shoes.
How do we handle this?
What would you do?
Put yourself in my position.
What would you do?
Now it's your turn.
It's the final showgirl.
Do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do, the final showgirl. Yes, this episode we are talking about The Last Showgirl, the story of Shelley, a glamorous showgirl who must plan for her future when her show abruptly closes after a 30-year run. And this was a moment for Pamela Anderson to really have this feature movie and this very Pamela role.
Yeah, we don't normally talk about things like this before the show, but we did a little bit on this one. This felt like the absolute perfect role for Pam Anderson to try to actually potentially get something in award season that wasn't negative.
Yeah, she's always wanted to be the dramatic actress, and she had a hard time breaking into that role. I think, honestly, just overcoming her incredibly stunning appearance when she was a little bit younger. And I think now coming into her own and having, some time pass, she finally created enough distance between who people know her to be in the past and the actress that I think she's always wanted to be.
Yeah, I don't think the porn tapes helped either, but
But you know what? The thing is they did that for the privacy of themselves, unlike people like Paris freaking Hilton, who actually did stuff for, attention. Like, they never meant for that to go public. It was stolen.
Yeah,
it was a private moment, and it was stolen.
Wasn't there a whole mini-series about that?
There was. Pam and
Tommy Lee?
Yeah, Pam and Tommy. It was a little series. But yeah, I mean, that was their own filming for their own personal use, and someone broke in and sold it and spread it around right at the time that she had her first big movie premiere, which was Barbed Wire, and completely derailed all of her press for that tour and the career that she really wanted to have.
Unfortunate.
So our topic here for this episode is really the story of a woman who got into being in a Vegas show back when Vegas was all adult shows with burlesque and fancy costumes and warnings of this is an adult-only show, not appropriate for children, and had done that since she was young and beautiful, and that was enough to be in the show. And she was in the show for 30 years, and that's just not what Vegas is or was about anymore. Those kinds of shows. It's now about concerts and big headliners. And we have this woman who basically let the relationship with her daughter suffer because she wanted to pursue her dreams of, wearing the fancy costumes and the glamorous headgear outfits, and has a daughter who sounds like she gave to some sort of family friend or acquaintance to raise, and the daughter never really understood why she was less important than
Wait, what?
the career. What do you mean?
No, you said family acquaintance to raise.
The Lisa and the so-and-so, she was talking about the people that she lived with.
Oh.
What's the disconnect here?
Well, I know she said that this is why you left me in the car with a Game Boy for 2 shows a night.
Yeah, and I think she took care of her until she got passed over to whomever she got passed over. I know she referenced Lisa, and she lives with other people. And
Well, yeah, but that seems like that's a post-adolescence life.
okay, well, regardless, I don't think that's really relevant. The point is that she had a child, and who was secondary to her pursuing her dream. And she really did the best she could to be a parent with the situation she was in, and has a daughter who felt like she wasn't enough.
Yeah, she was apparently banging Batiste on the side. That was a weird twist there. Yeah, it's certainly a story about when you get older and having not much to fall back on. And because I mean, in fairness, the person with the audition was probably correct. You got hired because you were beautiful and you were young, and that's what that show wanted. And she made a very successful career out of it until it wasn't. And it sounds like, as glamorous as it might have been, it never paid enough to really set you long term.
Well, and that's part of what she talks to her daughter about when her daughter wants to be an artist. And Lisa, the person that I think partially raised her, I'm not sure. Maybe someone can provide in the comments what their interpretation was. But how Lisa wants to encourage her to be a graphic artist, because basically that's a more practical occupation where you can make enough money and pay the bills. And that dilemma is so universal to so many people. Do you do the thing that lights you up that might not pay the money, or do you think that pays the money and kills your soul? And so many people are faced with that dilemma, not realizing that, it's sometimes complicated to find those ways to pay your bills, but also not live in a state of poverty.
Yeah, this one's hard for me because I've always been someone who couldn't kill my soul. I mean, maybe short term, if I needed to short term, but I've just, like, if I tried to do anything that killed my soul long term, I would end up honestly self-destructing somehow and pulling myself out of that situation. So I've always been the person who kind of had to try to do what, I can't say what he was meant to do, because I don't know that I've ever actually done what I've meant to do, which, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, I'm still to this day don't really know what that is. But yeah, I mean, there's the things that you can do at the end of the day and be happy that that's what you're doing. And then there's the things that you do that you're not. And I've never been able to be that person that just hated my job.
And that's what Pamela, her character Shelley, was really rooted in, is the fact that she chose the thing that she loved to do, even though it was basically, an adult burlesque show with apparently lots of boobies. But in doing that, she had sacrifices. And some of that sacrifices were, the relationship with her daughter, because at the time, she reminisces about how in the 80s, showgirls were ambassadors for Las Vegas, and they were whisked away to, locations to promote tourism in Las Vegas. And, Las Vegas is certainly not at all even remotely the same that it was in the 80s.
No.
And, I think this is probably a dilemma / life event that a lot of people can relate to, is pursuing something you enjoy and damn the consequences, or, making the decisions that, maintain the relationships and pay the bills and might not be as fulfilling. So in regards to the story, I think the other tangent that kind of runs through this film is aging out of an occupation or an industry or almost a culture, because when you look at what Las Vegas used to be, it really was about women with these big feather rhinestone headpieces that just pranced around and were draped in all of these glitter and glistening, and that was glamorous. And when that's not how the world is anymore, and you look at so many industries that have just faded over time, publishing and traditional media, and the world is just not the same as it used to be. At any point, time passes regardless of what the time period is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was looking around because I remember seeing where some of the hotels were, and I noticed that there was something that was knocked down there, which maybe I missed looking at something, but like Tropicana was an institution there, and Tropicana closed in April of 2024 permanently. And that's looked like what that was, but I can't imagine it was demoed so quickly that it made it into the movie, and I don't know. Either way, you're right. I mean, if there's one huge glaring example of something that has to consistently reinvent itself, it's Las Vegas. I mean, even before you had the Strip, you had like Fremont Street area, and that's the old Vegas.
Yeah, the downtown area.
Yeah.
Separated from the Strip.
And then you had the Strip. Even the Strip isn't what the Strip is anymore.
Oh, the Strip, I mean, for many, many, many years was just dirt. They didn't even have sidewalks on the Strip.
Yeah. No, it was.
But industries change. And, Las Vegas obviously has changed from an entertainment standpoint. But so many people are in an industry for their life. And then either where they work folds or they're forced into early retirement. And they don't know who they are or what their next step is because they've spent years or decades doing what they do, and they can't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's important to keep an eye on your profession, both the company you're working at and the profession as a whole, to know, okay, how long is this something that I can do? And if it were to all disappear, what would I really truly be able to do next? And I think that's where a lot of her panic came from, was realizing that, I think she realized and understood, where she was and who she was. And, I know she kind of had the breakdown on that stage, but I think that breakdown was almost more of her own character because, she definitely didn't seem like she was dumb or naive.
You're referring to the part where she realizes she needs to find a new job after being with the show for 30 years, and she has to go out on an audition, which she hasn't had to do since she was in her 20s.
Yeah, I'm about to say, and probably most of the people auditioning were in the 18 to 25 category, and she's 57.
Right.
I mean, that's a hard thing. I mean, it's one of those industries where it's difficult to be older.
And I have to say, if you're a 57-year-old woman, it's not even about being in a Las Vegas show. It's difficult in most any industry because somehow men get more distinguished and smarter, and women get old and senile.
It's funny because both Pamela Anderson and Demi Moore were nominated for Golden Globes, Demi Moore winning one for The Substance. And I find it interesting.
Listen to our podcast on that.
Yes. I believe that was a two-parter. I believe that was our only two-parter. But it was interesting because we actually had this exact same discussion on The Substance about men getting older and more distinguished and women not so much. So it's definitely a theme. But unfortunately, you're right. Now, I don't think it's necessarily easy for a guy once they get older to necessarily get a job. But I do agree that from a discriminatory perspective, you're more likely to be discriminated against as a woman than you are as a guy, unless you're in an upper management type position, you're looking at being the VP of whatever, then I don't think it matters.
And this was a really interesting role for Pamela Anderson because she's playing Shelley, who basically entered a field when she was young and at the top of her appearance physical wise, and then was only regarded as a beautiful body, a beautiful woman. And after time passes and beauty starts to show its age, as it does with all of us, isn't regarded quite as highly. And as a woman who was so revered and celebrated for her incredible beauty early in her career, I'm sure this story has a lot of interesting feelings for Pamela Anderson.
Yeah, this is very much a art mimicking life type situation. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Shelley and Pamela Anderson both had very similar career type trajectories. Now, I feel like if that movie had kept going another 5 or 10 minutes, we might not have seen a very happy ending because it seemed like
she didn't know what she's going to do.
Yeah, exactly. She was kind of lost, where Pam Anderson does seem to be figuring it out and doing quite well. I looked as soon as this movie was over whether or not she had been nominated because I thought surely she had. I actually also thought, I really thought Jamie Lee Curtis at least deserved a nod for Best Supporting Actress. I thought she was incredible. And I don't think it's an award-winning performance, but I think it's an award nomination-worthy performance. I overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It let me tell you, I will say, I mean, we're not spring chickens. We're not in our 20s here anymore. And I think the older you get, the more feels you're probably going to get from watching this movie.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, any story that's about aging and the vulnerability and the uncertainty that comes with change along the way is something that it's always going to resonate with folks that are of a certain age, and that's probably not something that a 20-year-old is going to quite grasp yet.
Yeah, so I think the what would you do, I think I've actually kind of already hit mine on that, is that you've really got to look at your life, you've got to look at your profession, look at your trajectory, and determine if this is long-term viable. And if for some reason it's not long-term viable, you've got to at least start thinking about, okay, what do I do if this ends? Like, I guess it's interesting in a way because sometimes you're not prepared for these things. I know you always tell me not to put dates on episodes or things within the episodes that date it, but I'm going to anyway. We're out in the LA area and we're dealing with wildfires right now. And it's one of those situations where we don't necessarily know what's going to happen next. And it's not something you're prepared for until it just kind of happens. Then you have to react. And that's not a great place to have to be. So having a plan, whether it's for a wildfire or a potential career change.
But the thing is after 30 years, you're not thinking about what do I do after this. You've been doing it for 30 years. You probably think you're always going to do it. And the world has changed so radically, even over just the last 5 or 10 years. But, people do the same thing year after year, in and out. And after 30 years, that's who you are. That's what you do. And there was one thing that she said, her character Shelley said in the film, which I thought was really important. I had mentioned earlier of how she had somewhat neglected her daughter. But the truth is, she said something in the film later on of basically, moms are just people. And they're doing the best that they know how to in that moment. And I think that's also really important, too, because although I use the word neglect because the daughter saw it as neglect, most people, unless you're a bad person who's intentionally doing bad things, most of us are just doing the best we can in any given moment. And we don't mean to hurt anybody. We don't mean to do the quote-unquote wrong thing. We're just doing the best we can with what we know in that moment. And I think that's really, I loved that line in there because it gave Shelley's character more dimension to know that she wasn't trying to let her ambition rule her life. She wasn't trying to, create a relationship with her daughter that was strained. She was just doing the best she could at the time. And I think that's
she was doing the thing that made it so that she could get out of bed every morning and move on with her life and not hate her life, which I think we all can relate to that to a certain point. And I agree with you on the point about 30 years, you're not thinking about what's coming next. I'm just saying it's one of those things that you unfortunately you have to kind of look at what are some of your worst case scenarios, what could happen here if something goes wrong. So that's all I'm trying to say is like figure out what a backup plan could look like. And hopefully you won't need it. But it's better to have a plan and not need it than vice versa.
We hope you enjoyed our episode. Thank you for listening. And to catch all the new episodes, please subscribe. We release 2 to 3 episodes weekly, so we'll have new content regularly. Until next time.